Mail-order alien wife arrived to find the human already married. But the kids chose her instead. HFY Jard Ashford wasn't expecting to be greeted by a glowing, green-skinned alien woman when he opened his front door. He had barely finished his morning coffee, the smell of fresh ground beans still hanging in the air when the delivery arrived. A cargo ship, no bigger than a human family car, hovered just outside his suburban home, its engines quiet as it settled onto the neatly trimmed lawn. Jard blinked, unsure of what he was seeing, but the commotion outside was unmistakable. His family had just received an unexpected guest. Jard had known the delivery would come eventually, but he never imagined it would happen like this. The letter had promised a mail-order alien bride, a tradition amongst the galaxy's wealthiest diplomats and traders. Jard had filled out the application years ago, just after a grueling assignment on a diplomatic mission to a distant planet. He didn't expect to be swept off his feet, but the promise of an exotic, intelligent companion was enough to spark his curiosity. His wife, Maria, on the other hand, had been less than thrilled when she found out. At first, Jard had thought Maria might warm to the idea, but that quickly faded when they received the first message from the alien planet, a beautiful, if intimidating, alien woman named Vera. But now, here she was. Jard stood frozen in the doorway, unsure what to do next. "Dad," the voice of his daughter Ella rang out from the living room, followed by the loud clatter of her feet as she rushed toward him. "What's happening outside?" Jard didn't respond. His eyes were still locked on the alien woman who had just stepped out of the ship. Vera was tall, much taller than any human woman he had ever met, with long, silver hair that shimmered in the morning light. Her green skin had a soft, almost metallic sheen to it, and her large, almond-shaped eyes sparkled with curiosity. "I think she's here for us," Jard muttered, his voice shaky. At that moment, Maria appeared in the hallway, having heard the commotion. Her expression went from confusion to concern as her eyes landed on Vera. "I didn't think they'd send her so soon," Maria said quietly. Maria wasn't one to shy away from difficult situations, but this was more than a bit unexpected. Jard had been honest with her about the mail-order alien bride, but he had never truly explained what it meant. He thought it would be a distant arrangement, some paperwork, a few messages back and forth, but not an actual person arriving at their doorstep. Vera smiled warmly at Maria, her voice soft and melodic. "Hello, I am Vera. I have arrived as promised." Maria stood frozen for a moment, her eyes flickering between Jard and Vera. It was as if she was still processing the reality of the situation, trying to make sense of the strange woman standing before her. Before she could say anything, their son, Liam, wandered into the room, rubbing his eyes sleepily. He had been having trouble sleeping, as usual, and had come down for breakfast. But the sight of Vera stopped him dead in his tracks. His jaw dropped as he gazed up at the alien woman. "Is she real?" Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vera chuckled softly, her silver hair cascading down her back as she bent to his level. "Yes, little one. I am very real." She reached out a hand, and although Liam hesitated for a moment, he eventually shook her hand, his eyes wide with wonder. Jard took a deep breath, trying to collect his thoughts. "Maria, maybe we should talk inside. We can figure this out." Maria nodded, but there was a faint trace of disbelief in her eyes. "Yeah, we need to talk." They all moved inside, Vera carefully stepping over the threshold of their home. It wasn't a mansion by any means, just a simple, cozy house with light blue walls and a small front yard. It was the kind of home that Jard had worked hard to maintain for his family. He was a good man, a loyal husband, but the decision he had made years ago now felt like an impossible weight. Once they were all seated in the living room, the conversation began. Jard spoke first, trying to explain the situation. "Vera, as you can see, things aren't exactly what I expected," he said slowly, looking at Maria. "This is my wife, Maria, and those are our kids, Liam and Ella." Vera nodded politely but remained silent for a moment. She studied the family, her large eyes scanning each of them with quiet intensity. "I understand. I was not prepared for this either," she said softly, her alien accent making the words sound even more enchanting. "I did not come to cause disruption. I came as agreed to form a partnership and bond with the human I was chosen for." Maria crossed her arms, her expression firming up. "You don't need to bond with him. He's married to me. This is my family. What exactly are you expecting to do here?" Jard winced at Maria's harsh tone. She had every right to be upset, but they needed to handle this carefully. He looked at Vera and tried to explain. "I think the best course of action is to figure out what happens next," he said. "Maria, I should have been more transparent with you, but this wasn't supposed to go like this." Vera, sensing the rising tension in the room, smiled warmly. "I am not here to replace anyone. I am here to learn. I will respect your family, and I will leave if I am unwelcome." But there was something in the way she spoke, something in her eyes that made Jard pause. Vera wasn't just a stranger. She wasn't here to cause trouble. There was an innocence about her, an openness that wasn't like anything Jard had expected. Maria softened slightly but didn't let her guard down. "So, what are you going to do exactly?" Vera hesitated for a moment before answering. "I will stay here for a while. I will observe, learn your ways. I will do what I can to help, but I do not wish to interfere." Jard's mind was spinning. He had no idea how this was going to play out, but one thing was clear: Vera was not the threat he had expected. She seemed genuine, maybe even kind. Maria looked at Jard, her face conflicted, but she didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she let out a deep sigh. "I don't know what's going on, but I guess we'll have to figure it out, one step at a time." Vera smiled softly. "Thank you, I will not cause any more trouble." Ella, still entranced by Vera's alien beauty, asked curiously, "Can you teach me about your home planet?" Vera's eyes lit up as she nodded. "I would love to. I have many stories to tell." Liam, still unsure, glanced at his parents. "Are you sure she's not here to take Dad away?" Maria placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "No, honey, she's not here to take anyone. Let's just take this one step at a time." Vera gave a soft nod, clearly respecting Maria's concerns. For the moment, the tension was somewhat eased, but there were many questions left unanswered. Would Vera really just stay in the background? Would she be able to fit into their family, or would her presence continue to create chaos? Jard didn't have the answers yet. But one thing was for sure: things were about to change in ways they hadn't expected. Days passed, and the awkwardness in the Ashford household didn't go away. Vera had settled into a quiet routine, often keeping to herself in the mornings as she tried to understand the human customs she had been thrust into. Jard, Maria, and the children did their best to make her feel welcome, but there was always an undercurrent of tension in the house. Maria and Jard still hadn't figured out what to do with Vera. She wasn't a threat, that was clear, but how could they go about explaining her presence to the neighbors or even the wider community? And what was Vera's role, really? Jard had hoped that things would smooth over quickly. After all, he hadn't expected Vera to be a problem. She was quiet, respectful, and never pushed for anything. But as the days went on, the strain in the Ashford household grew. Maria felt torn. She had always been the center of the family, the mother who handled everything with grace. But now there was someone else in her home, someone who was beginning to feel like a second mother to the children. Vera had an ease about her that Maria didn't have. While Maria was busy with her work as a schoolteacher, Vera would spend hours talking to Ella and Liam. She would play games with them, teach them about the stars, and tell them stories of her home planet, a planet where the sky was always twilight and the stars shimmered like diamonds. Ella, who had always been the more adventurous of the two children, had become particularly close to Vera. She would sit for hours, fascinated by Vera's tales of distant worlds and strange creatures. There was something magical about the way Vera spoke, her voice carrying the weight of an entire universe. Ella would ask endless questions about her planet, about life beyond Earth. "What's it like to live on a planet where the sun never rises?" Ella asked one afternoon as the two of them sat in the living room, surrounded by books. Vera smiled gently, her large eyes sparkling with fond memories. "It is beautiful," Vera replied softly. "There is a peacefulness in the night, and the stars are so bright. It feels as if they are watching over us, guiding us." Ella's eyes grew wide. "I wish I could see it." "You will," Vera said with a soft laugh. "One day, maybe, when you are ready." Meanwhile, Liam, who had been more reserved since Vera's arrival, had started spending more time with her as well. He would sit with her at the kitchen table, quietly drawing in his sketchbook while Vera watched over him, occasionally offering soft encouragement. One evening, as they worked together on a puzzle, Liam hesitated before speaking. "Do you miss your home?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vera looked at him, her expression softening. "Yes, sometimes, but I do not feel lonely here. Your family has shown me kindness, and that is enough." Liam nodded slowly. He had never been good with words, but he felt something in Vera's presence, something comforting. She wasn't just a stranger. She had become someone he could talk to when he didn't know what to say to his parents. Back in the kitchen, Maria stood at the counter, staring out the window. She had seen the way the kids interacted with Vera, and while part of her was grateful for the bond Vera was forming with them, another part of her couldn't shake the feeling of being replaced. It wasn't fair, she thought. She had been there for everything, for every moment of their children's lives. She had been the one to comfort them when they were sick, to help them with their homework, to listen when they had problems. But now Vera was here, offering the same care and attention with a gentleness that Maria found hard to compete with. Maria shook her head. She wasn't going to let this go on. She needed to talk to Jard. That evening after the kids had gone to bed, Maria and Jard sat down in the living room, the weight of the situation hanging between them. Jard could see the tension in Maria's shoulders, the way her jaw was clenched. "We need to talk about Vera," Maria said, her voice tight. "I know," Jard replied, rubbing his temples. "I don't know what to do anymore. She's not trying to take over, but it feels like we're being replaced." "I'm not worried about me," Maria said, her voice softening. "I'm worried about the kids. They're so attached to her already, it feels like they don't need me anymore." Jard looked at her, his heart aching. "Maria, that's not what's happening. They're not replacing you. They're just learning. Vera has different experiences, different stories to tell. She's a new voice in their lives, and that's what they're responding to." "I don't know," Maria muttered. "It just feels like they're getting all their love from her, and I'm being pushed out." Jard reached out, taking her hand in his. "I understand. But we need to remember Vera isn't trying to replace you. She's just part of this family now. She's not here to take my place or your place. She's here to offer something new. She's offering a different perspective." Maria pulled her hand away, standing up and pacing. "A different perspective? What do you mean by that, Jard?" "She's becoming part of our family, and I don't know how I feel about that. I've been the one here for the kids. I've been the one who has taken care of everything. And now she's taking over. She's spending all this time with them, teaching them things I don't even know." Jard stood up, moving to stand in front of her. "Maria, no one can replace you. You are their mother. I know this situation is difficult, and I know it's hard to watch someone else become close to our kids. But Vera is here, and whether we like it or not, she's part of our lives now. The kids like her, and that's a good thing." "I know it's a good thing," Maria replied, her voice trembling. "But why does it feel so wrong?" Jard didn't have an answer to that. The situation was strange. He had never expected to be in this position, with Vera living under their roof, forming a bond with their children. But one thing was clear: Vera wasn't the enemy. She was simply a stranger trying to fit into a world she didn't fully understand, and the Ashfords weren't going to kick her out. As the days passed, Maria tried to put her jealousy aside. She watched as Vera continued to bond with the children. There was no denying the connection she had with them. Vera had a way with Ella and Liam that Maria couldn't explain. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was just being herself, kind, gentle, and attentive. One afternoon, while Maria was grading papers at the kitchen table, she overheard Vera and the kids in the living room. They were sitting on the floor, laughing and playing some strange alien game that Vera had taught them. Liam was giggling as Vera guided his hands through the motions. "You're really good at this, Vera," he said. Vera smiled, her voice light with amusement. "I have had many years of practice." Maria couldn't help but smile to herself. As much as she wanted to fight it, she knew Vera wasn't the problem. It was her own fears, her own insecurities that were getting in the way. That evening after dinner, Maria sat down with Vera, unsure of what to say. She had been avoiding the alien woman for days, not knowing how to act. But now, with the tension slightly eased, she felt it was time to speak. "Vera," Maria began hesitantly, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how I've been acting. I know this is strange for all of us, but I want to make it work. I need to know that I'm not losing my place in our family." Vera's eyes softened, and she nodded slowly. "I understand. I would never take your place. You are their mother. I am just here to help. I want to learn and to grow with your family, but I am not here to replace anyone." Maria smiled, the knot in her chest loosening. "Thank you, Vera. I'm still figuring this all out, but I think I'm starting to understand." Vera smiled back, her voice gentle. "We are all learning together." Maria's heart warmed at her words. Maybe this wouldn't be as difficult as she had thought. Maybe there was a place for Vera in their family, not to take anyone's place, but to add something new. As the days passed, things in the Ashford household began to shift. What had started as an awkward situation was slowly evolving into something more complicated. Jard had always thought that once Vera settled in, things would return to normal. But the truth was, the arrival of the alien woman was changing their family in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't just the daily routine that was different. It was the unspoken bond that was growing between Vera and the children, especially Ella and Liam. Vera, in her quiet way, had slipped into the family dynamic, never forcing herself where she wasn't wanted. But it was undeniable that the kids had become attached to her. It wasn't just her stories about distant stars or the way she could speak with such gentleness and patience. It was the fact that she was present in a way Jard and Maria couldn't quite match. Vera was always available when the kids needed her. She didn't have the distractions of work or the weight of everyday life that Maria often carried. Vera could sit with them for hours, answering their endless questions about the universe or teaching them new games. One afternoon, as Jard was finishing up some work in the office, he overheard the kids laughing in the living room. At first, he was just happy to hear them enjoying themselves, but then he noticed something. It wasn't just that they were playing with Vera. Ella and Vera were sitting on the floor, giggling as Vera taught Ella how to draw strange alien symbols. Liam, who normally kept to himself, was sitting on the couch, watching with wide eyes. There was an intensity in the way he was looking at Vera, a mix of admiration and curiosity. Jard's heart sank slightly. His son had never been one for such affection. He had always been the more distant one, quietly drawing in his room or reading books about history. But now there was Vera, an alien woman from a distant world, who had captured his attention in a way that no one else could. It wasn't that Jard didn't appreciate Vera's presence. He did. She was kind, respectful, and patient with the kids. But something about the way they had taken to her was bothering him. He didn't want to admit it, but he couldn't help it. Was this really what was best for his family? Later that evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, the tension between Jard and Maria was palpable. Maria had been quieter than usual, lost in her thoughts as she pushed her food around on her plate. Jard knew she was struggling with the same feelings he had. They hadn't talked much about how things were going. "So," Maria began, breaking the silence. "How was your day, Vera?" Vera smiled brightly. "It was wonderful. I spent the afternoon with Ella and Liam. We drew pictures and talked about the stars. It was peaceful." Maria nodded, a slight frown tugging at her lips. "That sounds nice," she said, her tone carefully neutral. Jard could tell that Maria was feeling something deep inside. He didn't need to hear her say it out loud to know what was going on in her mind. She was jealous. And he wasn't sure how to make her feel better. "Maria," he began gently, "we need to talk about this." Maria set down her fork and looked up at him. "Talk about what?" "About Vera, about everything," Jard said. He glanced at Vera, who was sitting quietly, watching the conversation unfold. She didn't say anything, but there was a sadness in her eyes, as if she understood the rift that was forming between the family. Maria sighed, folding her arms across her chest. "I don't know how I feel about this anymore, Jard. The kids are. They're so attached to her, I don't know how to compete with that." Jard winced. "Maria, you don't need to compete with her. You're their mother." "I know," she replied quietly, "but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like she's taking my place." Vera, who had been silently listening, spoke up. "Maria, I do not wish to take your place. I am not here to replace you. I simply want to help. I want to be part of your family in whatever way I can." Maria looked at her, her expression softening. "I know you don't mean to, but you're always with them, always, and I'm here doing everything else. I'm the one who gets them ready for school, makes sure they're fed, makes sure they have everything they need. And now it feels like you're the one they go to for comfort." Vera lowered her gaze, her expression gentle. "I understand how this must be difficult, but I do not seek to take over. I want only to be a friend, a guide, someone who can share in their lives." Maria stared at Vera for a long moment, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Jard saw the flicker of doubt in her gaze, the conflict brewing in her chest. She was trying to understand, but it was clear that the situation was more complicated than either of them had expected. "Maybe I need to step back," Maria said quietly. "Maybe I need to let them have this. Let them have you." Jard looked at her, his heart heavy. "Maria, no, this isn't about stepping back. This is about working together. We need to figure out how to share this space. For the kids, for each other." Maria shook her head, standing up abruptly. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can just let go. Jard stood, moving toward her. You don't have to let go. You just have to see that this is different. Vera is a part of our family now. She's not here to replace you or me or anyone. She's just here, and we have to figure out how to make this work for everyone. Maria looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. But what if I'm not enough? What if I'm losing my place in their hearts? Jard reached for her, taking her hands in his. Maria, you're their mother. You will never lose your place in their hearts. You just have to see that there's room for more love, room for both of you. For a long time, Maria said nothing. She simply stood there, her hands trembling in his. But then, slowly, she nodded. I'll try, Jard, I'll try. The next few days passed in a strange sort of silence, with each member of the family trying to find their place in this new, unfamiliar dynamic. Jard watched as Maria slowly started to open up to Vera, realizing that there was no rivalry between them, only an opportunity for growth. The children, too, began to adjust. They were still as close to Vera as ever, but they began to understand that their love for her didn't mean they loved Maria any less. They were learning, in their own way, that love didn't have to be limited. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Ella asked Vera something that made everyone pause. Vera, she began, can you stay with us forever? Vera smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. I cannot promise forever, but I can promise that I will stay as long as I am needed. The words, simple as they were, seemed to bring a sense of peace to the room. It wasn't about forever or taking over. It was about being present, being part of something larger than themselves. And in that moment, Jard realized something important. He wasn't losing his family. It was just evolving. Maybe that was a good thing. A few weeks had passed since the conversation about Vera, and in many ways, things had begun to change. The Ashford household had found a strange but somewhat peaceful rhythm. Vera, while still very much a part of their lives, was beginning to understand the delicate balance that was needed. She was no longer a complete stranger in their home, but neither had she become an unquestioned part of the family. There was a sense of coexistence that had settled in, one that was neither perfect nor easy, but felt right in its own way. Jard had begun to notice the small things that made their new family dynamic work. Vera's quiet presence in the mornings, when the kids were still groggy from sleep, had become a comfort. She would prepare breakfast, and while she never pushed herself into the spotlight, she made sure the children felt cared for. She never replaced Maria's role as the main caregiver, but she had found a way to add her own unique touch. She would tell the children stories about her home planet, stories of distant galaxies, shimmering stars, and the beauty of a world that had never seen the light of day. Maria, for her part, was adjusting as well. The jealousy that had once gnawed at her had started to fade, replaced with a sense of understanding. She had learned to share her children, not just with Vera, but with the idea of growth. She watched as the kids grew closer to Vera, but now it no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a chance to broaden their world, to learn new things, to be exposed to a kind of love that was different but no less meaningful. She no longer saw Vera as someone trying to replace her, but as a helper, a friend, someone who was part of their journey, just like she was. It wasn't easy for Maria to accept at first, and there were days when the sting of uncertainty crept in. But as time went on, she learned to embrace the situation. There was something about Vera that made her heart ache in a way she hadn't expected, something about the alien woman's kindness, and the way she so naturally fit into their lives. It was as though Vera had always belonged there, even though Maria knew that wasn't true. But sometimes that was how life worked. Things didn't always unfold in the way you imagined, but that didn't make them any less real. One evening, as they all sat down for dinner, Jard could sense a change in the air. It was subtle, but it was there. The atmosphere at the table was lighter than it had been in days, and the kids were laughing, joking, and sharing stories. Vera, as always, listened with an attentive ear, her large eyes sparkling with interest. Maria glanced over at Jard, her face softer than it had been in a long time. It was clear that she had made her peace with the new family dynamic, even if she hadn't fully accepted it yet. There was a place for Vera, and Maria had come to realize that there was room for her too. You know, Jard said, looking at Vera with a smile, the kids have been telling me all about the games you've been teaching them. I'm surprised they've been so into it. Vera smiled warmly. I'm glad they enjoy it. It's a game from my home planet. It's about building something together, understanding each other's movements without words. It helps develop patience and trust. Liam, who had been unusually quiet lately, spoke up from the end of the table. I like the game. I think I'm getting better at it. You are, Vera said, her voice full of encouragement. You're a quick learner. The children beamed, proud of their accomplishments. Maria watched them, a small smile tugging at her lips. She had been worried about the bond they were forming with Vera, but now, as she saw them happy, it didn't seem so bad. In fact, it felt right. After dinner, Jard and Maria found themselves alone in the living room. The kids had gone upstairs to get ready for bed, and the house had quieted down. For the first time in weeks, they were able to talk without the constant interruption of daily life. I think I'm starting to get it, Maria said softly, her gaze fixed on the empty space where the children had been sitting just moments ago. I don't feel as threatened anymore. Jard raised an eyebrow, surprised at how quickly the situation had evolved. You do. Maria shook her head, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and sadness. I think I was scared at first, scared of losing my place, scared of losing my family. But the more I see them with Vera, the more I realize that nothing is being taken away. We're all just expanding. I don't have to do everything on my own anymore. Jard smiled, his hand reaching out to take hers. I'm proud of you for coming to terms with it. I know it wasn't easy, but you've been amazing through it all. Maria's smile faltered, and she looked down at their hands. I still don't know how I feel about her staying here, though. It's one thing to accept that she's part of our lives, but another to know that she's here. For good. I guess I'm still processing it. Jard nodded in understanding. We're all processing it. I don't think we'll ever fully have all the answers, but we'll figure it out together. The room fell into a comfortable silence as they sat there, hand in hand. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The family was adjusting, and so was Vera. It was a strange, new beginning, but one that had the potential to be something good. Over the next few weeks, Vera's presence continued to shape their family life in subtle ways. She wasn't just a guest in their home anymore. She had become a part of their everyday lives. She was there for the small moments, the quiet mornings when the kids were getting ready for school, the evenings when they sat down together for dinner, the nights when they all gathered in the living room to watch movies or play games. She had become a steady, comforting presence, one that they hadn't known they needed but couldn't imagine living without. Maria had started to appreciate Vera's company more and more. There were times when the alien woman's stories about distant planets made her wonder what else was out there in the universe. She had never considered such things before, but now, with Vera's presence, she saw a world beyond their small home, beyond the simple routines of their everyday life. There was a universe waiting to be explored, and it was hard not to be inspired by Vera's curiosity and enthusiasm. The children, of course, were thriving. Liam had become more outgoing, less reserved around strangers, and more willing to try new things. Ella, who had always been a natural leader, had started taking more of an interest in helping Vera around the house. She would spend hours talking to her about her home planet, asking questions about the creatures that lived there, the plants, the stars. Vera had become her teacher, her guide into a world that Ella had only dreamed about. One evening, as the family sat down for another dinner, the conversation turned to something that had been on Jard's mind for days. I've been thinking, he said, looking around the table, that maybe it's time to think about the future. We've been living with this uncertainty for a while now, but we need to figure out what comes next. Maria glanced at him, a hint of apprehension in her expression. What do you mean? I've been talking to the embassy, Jard said carefully. They've asked me about Vera's status, about how long she's going to stay here. They want to know what we plan to do next. Vera, who had been listening quietly, looked up. I will stay as long as I am needed, she said softly, her voice steady and clear. Maria nodded slowly. We've made room for her. We've learned to live with her. Maybe it's time we stop thinking of her as a guest and start thinking of her as a part of the family. Jard looked at her, a smile tugging at his lips. Exactly. It's time we all stop pretending that this is temporary. We're in this together. The room grew quiet for a moment, as if everyone was weighing the significance of those words. But in the end, they all knew that this new family structure was the right one. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Months had passed since Vera had arrived, and the Ashford family had undergone a transformation they hadn't expected. What had started as a complicated and confusing situation had slowly turned into something that felt natural. Vera was no longer a stranger in their home. She was a steady, familiar presence. She had become a part of the family in a way none of them had anticipated. Jard watched as his children, Ella and Liam, blossomed under Vera's influence. They had both changed in small but noticeable ways. Liam, once reserved and distant, had become more open and confident, thanks to the gentle encouragement Vera had given him. He was now quick to ask questions and share his thoughts, something that had always been a struggle for him before. Ella, too, had become more thoughtful, learning to listen more closely to others, and even taking on the role of helping Vera teach Liam some of the alien games she had introduced. It wasn't just the children who had changed. Jard and Maria had, too. In the beginning, the tension between them had been thick, but now they had found a new understanding of each other. They had shared their concerns, their fears, and their hopes for the future, and in doing so, they had grown closer. Maria, who had once felt threatened by Vera's presence, now saw her as an ally, someone who helped lighten the load, not just as a mother figure, but also as a friend. Maria had even started spending more time with Vera. The two of them would sit together in the evenings, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing. Maria had come to appreciate Vera's perspective on life, the way she viewed the world with a quiet wonder, seeing beauty in the smallest details. Sometimes Vera would talk about her home planet, where the stars never stopped shining, and Maria would listen, fascinated by her stories. It was a side of life that Maria had never considered, and in those moments, she found herself grateful for Vera's presence. One afternoon, Jard and Maria decided to take the kids to the park for a family outing. It had been a long time since they had done something simple together, and they knew it was time to reconnect as a unit. Vera insisted that she stay behind, but Jard and Maria encouraged her to come along, knowing it was important for the whole family to be involved in each other's lives. The park was just a short drive away, and as they arrived, the kids rushed out of the car, eager to run around. Jard and Maria walked side by side, their hands brushing occasionally, and Vera followed a little behind, observing the family as they interacted. It wasn't long before the children had found a playground, their laughter filling the air. Jard smiled at the sight of his children running around, their faces lit up with joy. Maria, too, looked content, her eyes following their every move. She glanced over at Vera, who was watching the children with a soft smile. It struck Maria that Vera wasn't just an outsider anymore. She wasn't just a guest in their home. She was a part of their family. "Do you mind if I ask you something?" Maria said to Vera, her voice soft. Vera looked over at her, her expression curious. "Of course, Maria. What's on your mind?" Maria hesitated for a moment before speaking. "How do you do it? How do you stay so calm all the time, even when things get difficult?" "When I was in your position, I don't think I would have been able to handle everything the way you have." Vera smiled, her eyes warm. "I learned a long time ago that life is not about controlling everything. It's about learning to let go of what you can't change and embracing what you can. I've always believed that life, in its purest form, is about connection, not just with the people around you, but with the world itself. When you learn to see life that way, it's easier to find peace in every moment." Maria nodded slowly, taking in her words. There was something about Vera that was calming, something about the way she viewed the world that made everything seem less overwhelming. Maria had spent so much of her life trying to keep control, trying to manage everything. But maybe, just maybe, she had been going about it all wrong. "I think I'm starting to understand that," Maria said quietly. "Maybe it's time I let go of some of the things I've been holding on to." Vera's smile grew wider. "I think you're already on the right path." As the afternoon wore on, the family played together, enjoying the simple pleasures of being outdoors. The children ran races, climbed on the jungle gym, and laughed together, their energy contagious. Jard and Maria took a moment to sit on the grass, watching them with fond smiles. "You know," Jard said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what comes next for us." Maria raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jard took a deep breath. "I think we need to stop thinking of Vera as someone who's just here for a while. I think it's time we make this more permanent. She's a part of this family now, and we need to make sure she knows she's welcome." Maria looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "You really feel that way?" Jard nodded, his gaze soft. "I do. She's been a part of our lives for so long now, we've all changed because of her, and I think it's time we accept that this is our new reality. Maria's eyes watered slightly and she smiled. I agree. She's become part of us in a way I didn't expect. She's helped the kids and she's helped me. I think it's time we make her feel like she truly belongs here. The conversation was a turning point. The tension that had once been so thick in the air had dissipated, replaced by something warmer, a sense of unity, of belonging. Jard and Maria had found a new understanding of each other and of Vera. It was no longer about the fear of losing what they had. It was about the joy of expanding their hearts to make room for something new. Later that night, after they had returned home, Jard and Maria sat down with Vera in the living room. The children had already gone to bed and the house was quiet. The three of them sat together, and for the first time Vera spoke openly about what had been on her mind. I have been thinking a lot, Vera began, her voice steady. When I first arrived, I didn't know what to expect. I thought I was just here for a short time to fulfill an agreement. But now, after all this time, I've come to realize that I don't want to leave. I want to stay to be part of this family. But I also don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. Jard and Maria exchanged a glance, and then Jard spoke. Vera, he said softly, you've been part of this family from the moment you stepped into our home. You don't have to go anywhere. You belong here. We want you here. Maria nodded, her voice thick with emotion. We do. You become a part of our lives in a way we never expected, and we're glad you're here. Vera's eyes filled with tears, and she smiled, her heart full. Thank you. I never thought I would find a place like this, a family. I will never be able to express how much this means to me. Jard reached over and gently placed his hand on hers. You don't need to say anything, Vera. You're family, and family doesn't have to be perfect. We just have to be here for each other. And in that moment, something shifted. They were no longer just a family trying to make the best of a strange situation. They were a family, plain and simple. A family that had opened their hearts to something unexpected, and in doing so, had found something richer than they could have ever imagined. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the Ashfords settled into their new normal. Vera, once a stranger from another world, had become a permanent fixture in their lives. And while there were still days of uncertainty, of learning and growing together, there was also an unspoken understanding that they had created something unique and special, a family that defied expectations and embraced change. And in the end, that was all that mattered.